Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you are new, welcome to the channel. Glad to have you on the channel today. Wanted to make a video talking a little bit about leadership billets at Officer Candidate School. Leadership billets are basically leadership positions that you're put in either within your platoon or within your company, in which you will be graded on, and from there, which will tie into your leadership grade, which is a big portion of your overall grade at Officer Candidate School. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get right into it. All right, so when you get to OCS, you will serve in two different leadership positions, or billets, as they're called down at OCS. That being one in the beginning of the cycle, one at the end of the cycle. Goal there is really just to show improvement, right? In terms of how they pick those billets, it's honestly by random, so don't take it to heart if you're putting a lower billet or a higher billet for that matter. Like, I know sometimes in my cycle, they actually took kids who they thought were kind of scared to lead and they put them in bigger positions. So don't take it to heart if you only get low positions, or don't take it don't get so excited or prideful if you're only in the higher positions. All right. Now, in terms of the possible positions you can be in, I'll name them off. If you're familiar with military lingo and roughly the structure of a company, you'll understand this. If not, you probably won't, but that's okay, because when you get there, it'll all make sense. So some of the possible positions that you could be placed in are the candidate squad leader, candidate platoon guide, candidate platoon sergeant, candidate platoon commander, and then that's from the platoon level, so the platoon level down. And then from the company level, so that's the next highest level, you could either be the candidate company gunnery sergeant, the candidate company first sergeant, the candidate company executive officer, or, in the biggest and the highest position you can be, the candidate company commander. Now, in each role, there are obviously different duties, right? I'm not going to list off the duties of every single position, because when you go to Officer Candidate School, you'll receive this book. This is the Candidate Regulations book, and it will go over the duties of every single position. That being said, just to give you guys a rough idea as to responsibilities, I'll go ahead and give you an idea as to what it was like when I was a squad leader. So when I was a squad leader, I was in charge of about 12 to, I think it was actually 13 guys in my squad in particular. Just depends on the size of the platoon, right? So 13 guys. So in the morning, I had to make sure that they showered and shaved and brushed their teeth and everything, did basic hygiening. That's within the time frame of them waking up and us going to our first chow block, so morning chow. So we usually had PT, so in the morning I would wake them up and they had to shave and brush their teeth. Those were the two big things. All right. After that, I had to make sure that they were all wearing the proper attire for whatever the event was. So on a day that we were doing, let's say a PFT, I had to make sure that they were in a marked PT shirt, which is just a green t-shirt, the green shorts. A marked t-shirt basically it just has your company name, your last name, and then your ZAP number, which is like an identification number. But I had to make sure they were all in that. So PT gear, marked PT shirt, and then tennis shoes, or go fasters as we call them down there, and white ankle socks. All right, and then I usually had to make sure too that their water was full. If not, it was on me. It was my fault, right? So when I say make sure these things are done, it means it was my responsibility to do that. If I didn't do it, then I got points dinged from my overall evaluation. So obviously, the easy things are the marked PT shirt and go fasters. Everybody did that. I really didn't have to make sure that got done. But one thing that I did have to make sure that always got done was that they'd fill their water, because you couldn't see how much water's in the Camelback. So if you don't physically grab the Camelback and check, kids might be too lazy to fill it. And then when you go outside and one of the instructors says, hey, Candidate Danko, is your squad full on water? And I say, whatever, yes, Staff Sergeant, yes, Gunnery Sergeant. They'll go around and they'll check. And if it turns out that they're not full on water, or their Camelback's pretty much empty, that's my fault. All right. So same goes for when we go to a class or an evolution where we need a certain item. So a good example is when we go to class, they need to have usually an ink stick, so that's just a pen, and then a notebook that they can write with so they can take notes. If they didn't bring that, it was my fault. right? It wasn't their fault, it was my fault. So if you kind of understand that, basically what I'm getting at is that your people, you're in charge of getting your people to certain places, not only on time, but with all the proper equipment and looking not jacked up, right? If their uniform looks like trash, that's also on you. So that's a kind of a loose description of some of the little things that I had to deal with on a typical basis as a squad leader. Was pretty much just making sure they were where they needed to be. So our squad as a whole, making sure that they were wearing what they needed to wear and made sure they had the gear that they needed to have. All right. So if you went up a couple levels, like let's say the candidate platoon commander, he was in charge of making sure that 4 squads, so not just my squad, but 3 other squads were where they needed to be with what they needed to have and, you know, wearing what they needed to wear. So I don't know if that gives you a rough idea, but basically that's, you know, like I said, a loose description of how that works. So before you start every billet, you will meet with an advisor. That advisor will be one of the actual platoon staff that is in the physical position that you are going into as a candidate. So for example, if you were going to be the candidate platoon commander, your advisor will be the actual platoon commander. All right. And what they'll do is they'll sit down with you. They'll explain their expectations. They'll talk about the duties of the role. And some of them will go in depth a bit further and talk about some of the things that some of the other candidates have been missing while serving in that role. And maybe some things that you should focus on if you want to get a better grade than your peers. All right. So it's not all about the grade. Don't be one of those guys who only cares about the grade, but it is important, obviously, because it factors into your GPA and you want to do well while you're down at officer candidate school. You want to make sure you're meeting the marks so that you don't get kicked out. In terms of each billet lasts 48 hours, so 2 days. You're only in the billet for 2 days. You'll turn over like the night before the day you're going to start. So you'll start at, let's say, 19:30. That's the changeover time. And you'd go from 19:30 on one day, 48 hours, and change over at 19:30 2 days later. All right. In terms of when you're notified, just as I'm thinking about a couple things to mention here, you'll be notified usually a week or half a week before your changeover time. In order to get an idea as to when you're going to be in the role, so you can kind of prep. So about a week, they'll tell you like, hey, just so you know, in 1 week you're going to be in this role. They'll put it on a piece of paper or something on the bulletin board. And then 24 hours before you get into the role, you'll meet with the advisor. Then you'll do the position, which is 48 hours. And then after that, 48 hours from when you finish is when the advisor will meet back with you once again and go over the feedback that they have for you and give you your grade for the position. So the grading basically works like they'll give you a numerical value, a percentage between 1 and 100. So you'll likely be in the 80 to 90% range. If you're lower than 80%, you failed. If you're in the 90 plus, it means you did a really good job. And then they'll also tell you where you rank versus the other people who are in that position. So for example, if I was a squad leader and I finished my position, I would get a grade, and then they would say, hey, that's the second best grade I've given for squad leaders thus far. So a cool little opportunity for you to compare yourself and see where you stand in terms of your peers. In terms of a couple other like minor things that I think are important to mention that'll change your day-to-day routine. When you're in a billet, you'll wear a rank insignia. So, if you're the candidate platoon commander, you'll wear second lieutenant bars on your camis. They'll have like some red felt or velvet or whatever behind it. So basically, so people know that you're not an actual second lieutenant and like people aren't saluting you and stuff. And then other than that, you'll stand in front of the formation. I told you you'll have a bunch of different responsibilities. But in terms of like broad spectrum changes, the only other thing that really is, kind of different is that you'll eat last at every meal. So when we go to the chow hall, all of your people eat before you do. So for example, if you're the platoon sergeant, everybody else, so the entire platoon eats, then all the squad leaders eat, then the platoon guide eats, and then you eat. So it's every rank under you eats before you do. That's how it works. And under that rationale, if you're the candidate company commander, you eat last. So just keep that in mind. It's good to know, and it's a good leadership lesson, because when you're in the fleet, obviously your people should always come first really in anything, but especially when it comes to chow, you don't eat until every single one of them has food and is eating. All right, so that's pretty much, oh, and I'll add one more thing here actually. You'll also have to write peer billet evaluations at the end of your time in, so your little like tour. So that basically means that you'll be writing an evaluation for every leader under you. So the reason I'm telling you that is because if you blow off the guy who's like a rank above you, it will show in those peer billet evaluations. So what that means is respect the rank, right? If you are the squad leader and your candidate platoon commander is telling you, to do something, that you need to get something done, or that your squad needs to go and clean something, whatever the case may be, whatever task he provides, you need to do it. If you just say like, screw you, man, or nah, I'm not doing that, little things like that, he's just gonna write you a crappy peer eval, and that actually goes in your physical OCS record. Like whether it's good or bad, the evaluation goes in your record. So you don't want to have a lot of bad ones, obviously, because that will just tear your grade apart. So keep that in mind. Like I said, respect the rank. If you got a guy who's a real hothead and he just doesn't listen to anybody, you should remind him as the superior or senior billet that you have the peer billet evals and that those are important. And if you're in the flip side and the guy above you is like a garbage leader, you should pull him off to the side, talk with him, and basically communicate with him what you feel could be done better to be a more effective team. Because at the end of the day, you want to be the team, you want to be communicative, and you obviously want to make sure that you guys mesh together well, because you don't want a bad eval. All right, lastly, a couple personal notes that I kind of threw together that that'll help you guys pretty much get ahead of the game, and honestly I hope will help you guys get the best grades in your platoon. These are things that I learned over serving in my positions, and I think it's very important that you guys take these, because everybody during the cycle will learn these. However, if you know them coming in, you'll be just like that much further ahead of the game. All right, so the first thing, accountability is paramount. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but you need to know where people are at all times. All right, so if you're a squad leader and one of your candidates leaves to go to medical in the morning, you need to know obviously who it is. You need to know that you're down one guy in your squad, and you need to know where he's going and the reason he's going. You don't need to ask him why he's going to medical, as in like what injury he has, but you do need to ask him where he's going should he, decide to go to medical in the morning. All right, the same goes at the platoon, platoon commander level. The platoon commander needs to know where everybody's going, and he needs to ensure that the squad leaders obviously know where their people are, right? So the way the chain of command works is that if you're a squad leader, one of your guys leaves, you let the next highest rank know so that they're aware of the absence, and so that whenever they're reporting their numbers, they can report accurate numbers. All right. Accountability also goes for rifles. If you ever leave a rifle like in the squad bay and the platoon leaves, or you lose a rifle or whatever it is, you are in deep doo-doo. Like your grade will not be good at all, because they care a lot, like even more so than the accountability of the candidates. They care about the rifles like nobody's business, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a weapon, and in the wrong hands, or if it's out of sight, it could do some serious damage, even though you're not putting in real rounds. So keep that in mind. Accountability is essential. Anytime somebody goes anywhere, make sure you know, and then make sure you go up to your advisor and you report your numbers to them to let them know that they left. That just shows that you're constantly keeping track, and your advisor will like that. In terms of getting your people to do what you want them to do, I always say avoid forceful yelling. Obviously, you need to yell and to be vocal and to be loud and assertive whenever you are, saying like, hey, we have like 5 minutes, or like, hey, like first squad, 3 minutes left in the head, something like that. You need to be more assertive. But at the same time, if you're kind of barking out orders, people are less likely to listen to you. And honestly, once they get to that point where they're less likely or don't want to follow you, they're just not going to do the stuff. Or if they do it, it's going to be so slow that you're going to look like an idiot. My whole thing was, when I was in the positions, is that I'd rather inspire people to want to follow me versus forcing them to do so. So if I asked them, hey, or if I told them, hey, we're cleaning right now, and I assigned like a group of 4 kids like a nasty job, like whatever it was, cleaning like some junk on like the toilets or something like that, or whatever, like the worst job, whatever it was, I would go with them to do that job. So even though they were kind of like pissing and moaning and pissed off that they were the ones who had to do it, I would come with them. And when I did that, they were less like mad or less upset with me, and more so understood that like I'm a peer as well. And so they were like, hey, he needs a good grade. He wants a good grade. And not just, aside from the grade, he is one of us. So, we're a team. We're going to treat him accordingly. So don't take your position and be in some sort of high horse where like you don't have to clean, you don't have to do any work. You just tell people what to do, boss them around. It's not going to work. Your peers are not going to like you, and not just they're not going to like you, they're not going to do it. And then, like I said, your grade is going to show. You're going to get a poor grade because you couldn't get people to go anywhere or do really anything. In terms of confidence and speaking in front of your people, always be, like I was saying before, be assertive, be loud, be vocal. Try not to, some kids did this when they were yelling. I think it's the first time they were kind of like, being or using their volume and using their words or something to tell people what to do, where to go. Don't stutter. Don't stutter and know what you're saying. I mean, if you're just talking for the sake of talking, meaning you start to talk, you kind of trail off because you don't really know what you're saying, or you tell your people to do one thing, but then somebody comes in, like the candidate platoon commander, and tells you like, hey man, like I just told you that you guys aren't doing that, or what are you doing? Basically, before you address your people, know what you're going to say. Like, I know that sounds weird and kind of stupid, but there's a lot of kids who didn't know what they were saying whenever they started talking, and then they just sound like babbling idiots. And that's another thing. You're just going to lose the respect, and honestly, like, you're going to lose your dignity in front of your peers, or in this case, the people you're leading, and they're going to be less likely to want to, to be led by you. So keep that in mind. Be confident, eye contact when you're addressing your people. If somebody's goofing off while you're talking, I mean, you don't have to be rude, but, I wouldn't really say call them out directly, but pull them off to the side after and talk to them, That's what a confident, strong leader does. And when you do things like that, they will be like, all right, I need to stop like messing around. I need to listen to this kid, whatever, because at some point they're going to be in a billet. And that really ties into one of my last points here is whenever you're not in a billet, you should be putting out 100%, every single day, every single hour, every single second, because those people who are in a billet at that time are going to see what you're doing, and they're going to mimic it whenever you're in the billet. So when the roles are reversed. So when your general population, if they ask you to do something, they tell you to do it quick, you put in 100%, you do it quick, you get that, get it done, whatever. They're going to say, hey, look, he put out for me, I'm going to put out for him. It's little things like that, especially at Officer Candidate School. It's like, we're looking out for each other. One of my sergeant instructors always used to say like habu, which is like hook a brother up. So make sure that you're constantly helping out your peers, and they'll look out for you. You look out for them, they'll look out for you. And then just one final note that I have here is just double check everything. All right. So if you tell them to bring, like, let's say this book, right? Because they'll bring it everywhere they go. You should every day, for the most part, ask them, hey, like, let me see your book right now. All right. I know that sounds dumb because they'll be bringing it everywhere. And maybe towards the end of the cycle, they'll roll their eyes and be like, dude, like, piss off. But it's crazy how when you don't physically check or look at it, people forget it. So that's the whole point of double checking everything, right? Is like kids think like, oh, like it's, for example, the candidate regulations, like, oh, I bring that every day, like it's in my pocket. They, whatever, touch their pocket, it feels like it's in there. And sure enough, we get somewhere, they say, pull out your regs, and somebody doesn't have it. So that's also important, like I said, in the example I used before with the water, right? Like filling up canteens, filling up your Camelback, always double check it. Because if one of the staff asked you if it's full and you say yes, and it turns out it's not full because you didn't check, it means that you didn't really take the initiative to ensure that all your people were following what you said. You just assumed they did. So one of the things that they say down there all the time is inspect what you expect. So like if you want to get a good grade, do that. And I promise you, you pay attention to those little details, you will succeed in your leadership billet and you'll do better than your peers. All right, so that pretty much concludes the video. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know it was a bit long-winded, but I hope that this video helps anybody going to OCS. I will make some more videos that talk about like SULI 1, 2, and 3, and then LRC 1 and 2. If you guys have questions on that. If you have questions about anything else, just drop a comment. I'm happy to make videos on the questions or the topics that you guys want. This video actually was from a comment from my last video. So again, I'm happy to make these videos. Just let me know, and let me know what you guys want, and I'll totally whip up the video for you. So, but otherwise, like I said, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.